Hi everyone, welcome back. On my last video I was talking about my grand adventure heading west on the bike, heading into the wild frontier. Quite the adventure it was. Headed all the way out to the Pacific Ocean in San Francisco and met up with my friend Nick. And I was ready to, I had arrived, but I was ready to get to work and learn how this big wall climbing thing works. So he had come out and picked me up. Thank you, Nick, for helping me out with that. I got my truck all ready for like camping and sleeping in it, and I was ready to stay in Yosemite as long as possible. So loaded up on a bunch of groceries and we headed in there. Nick could only stay for a couple days, so he and I did some climbing right off the bat. But eventually he left, and I started meeting up with different climbers from Camp 4. So Camp 4 is kind of it's always been the the historical meeting point for different climbers. There's like a bulletin board where you can meet up with different people, or at least there used to be. But the problem that I had to figure out right away was that you're only allowed to stay in Camp 4 for like a week. So I had my truck all ready to go for camping in it, and I soon learned that I need to kind of lay low and stay keep a low profile. So I would go sleep at different trailheads or like the Awani Hotel or wherever I wasn't gonna draw much attention. And if a ranger ever came and knocked on the truck, I would have to just lay there completely still and act like there was no one inside. And by doing this, I was able to stay there for a month. So, and then I found like a bear box store to keep my food. But I figured out kind of my way to be able to stay there for a long period of time. I think since then things have changed a little bit. I think you have to have like a parking permit on your truck now. But anyway, started meeting up with different climbers from Camp 4, heading up on all sorts of big free climbs. I knew that I wanted to get right on El Cap, but I also kind of realized that I needed to do some sort of training and get used to getting on that caliber of climb. And I also needed to learn how to big wall climb. I had never big wall climbed before. In order to do that, you have to know how to aid climb, which is where you're actually, like in a big wall climb, there's typically sections, if not the entire climb, that's going to be too hard to free climb, meaning you can't use your hands and feet to get up the stone itself. You actually have to put in the gear and hang from the gear for at least some sections. Like the nose of El Cap, for example, unless you can free climb 514, you're looking at doing a lot of aid climbing so that you can get up the thing. So I had never done this before. There was a lot of equipment I was going to need to buy. I hadn't researched any of this stuff, so I just, I had just arrived in the valley only knowing that I needed to climb El Cap, but not knowing how to do it. So some different guys took me under their wing. Towards the end of my stay in Yosemite, this guy George from Seattle was kind of in a similar boat to me. He had just learned how to big wall climb, and we kind of started doing some little practice climbs. Towards the end of my month there, we ended up going out to this route called the South Face of Washington Column, which is kind of a typical trainer for people wanting to pursue big wall climbing. But we started heading up, and it wasn't too bad. This was my first legitimate aid climb. This is a 2-day route. We got up to the halfway point, which is this ledge called Dinner Ledge, and I launched off on this lead, and I got to about 20 feet off of Dinner Ledge and put in a little cam, one of the tinier ones, and high stepped in my atria, which is like this cloth ladder. So I high stepped, and then as I stood up, the piece kind of rotated like this a little bit, and as soon as it had this sidewards pressure on it, it just popped. And I just heard this ping, and then all of a sudden, like the world was rushing around me, and I was just flying backwards. I think my body just kind of naturally rotated sideways, and I just, everything kind of went black and wind rushing, and I just completely impacted on Dinner Ledge, just free fall, nothing between me and the ledge, and just completely destroyed myself. And then I got knocked unconscious. When I came to, I discovered that the side of my body was all wet, and I didn't know what was going on. I had the adrenaline rushing. But as I looked down, I noticed my Gatorade bottle, which had been clipped to my harness full of water, had gotten destroyed. I came to find out later on that it had actually rotated in front of my pelvic bone and acted like an airbag and saved my hip from shattering. So it was quite the fortuitous event to happen there. And then a lot of impact on my helmet, and then I just ragdolled on this like flat rock ledge. But I had all this adrenaline flowing, and I just felt bad and like embarrassed that that had happened. I actually had a piece between where I fell and the ground, but it was so far down that my ground fall potential wasn't protected at all. So I just felt like an idiot. So I immediately got back on the lead, and started climbing. And then George was like, "Whoa, dude, you should let's chill out for a minute." I guess I had blood just all over me. I just looked like a wreck. So I just kind of chilled out for a minute, and then sure enough, as the adrenaline started wearing off, my whole body just started to swell. I wasn't able to breathe, and so we're like, we got to get out of here. So we started rappelling and just bailed on the route. By the time I got to the base of the rappels, I mean, I could not breathe anymore. It was a really terrifying experience. And thankfully, I had gotten into an accident in a very good spot because the hospital for Yosemite, it just happens to be right at the trailhead for the Washington column. So we got back to the parking lot, and it was like a 30-second drive to get to the hospital. So I was able to get right into the emergency room there, and they were able to get some morphine in me and bring the swelling down and able to get me to the point where I was breathing again. So they did a bunch of tests on me and found out that I had internal bleeding, and they were requiring me to get a medevac flight out to a different hospital. But I told the guy that was working on me, like, I don't have any insurance. I can't afford any sort of medevac flight or anything like that. Like, what's my bill already? Found out it was already $1,000, and I said, thanks, no thanks, I gotta go. So against his his wishes, I signed the paperwork and paid the huge bill and took off out of there, apparently all messed up. But took the next 3 days. I remember just walking into Camp 4 to grab my food, just hobbling, not even able to really walk, and just blood all over the place, looking like an absolute mess. But I got a lot of weird looks. But I just kind of laid on the Merced River beach for 3 days pretty much, and just kind of laid there, and my body just started healing itself, and by some kind of miracle, like, I was okay. After 3 days, I was actually doing so fine that I was ready to start climbing again, or so I thought. So went and found George again, and he said, "Hey man, I want to get back on this route. This thing kicked my butt, so I want to go finish it off." So we did. Went back to South Face of Washington column, and success, got all the way through it. But I had been there now for about 4 weeks, and after that big hospital bill, I was out of money, and it was time for me to get to work. So on the next video, I'll talk about my my interim work period. I ended up finding this really cool job where I got to work as a cell tower climber. So I got to work industrially. So it was actually a really fun gig, and did that throughout that winter. So I'll talk about that on the next one. Thanks, guys.